Welcome to Technado with Don Pizzette, featuring sysadmin expert Don Pizzette, security specialist Daniel Lowry, and Peter.
Hello and welcome to Technado with Don Pizzette. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I am joined today by Don Pizzette. Don, how you doing?
I am doing great. You know, I'm stepping away from my hosting duties from last week, so back into just snarky technology commentator.
Yeah, I heard it went okay.
Highest rated episode ever.
The reviews that I've seen. All right, and Daniel, how are you?
Why are you asking so many questions? Why are you always, are you wearing a wire?
Still
Is that
on,
what's
your,
happening
on
here?
your normal roll. Thank you, Daniel.
That's what I thought.
I'm not looking forward to when we are uncovidized and back right next to each other, or I'm in like punching distance from you. I like this across the room thing. And we are joined today by our special guest. We have Nick Russo, who is a technical leader at Cisco. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to participate.
We are excited to have you as well. You've got a nice setup. It looked like a professional like record studio there. Are you a singer, or is this like podcasts?
No, a lot of it is for video recording, doing video on demand, live courses and such. And this was a good way to do soundproofing. And you can tell it, it's a, well, I'm not going to turn around and shake it, but it's a wall divider, so it's portable too. And if I need to fold it up for more space, I can do that. So it's kind of handy.
Cool.
Yeah, I need to get like a cool Zoom background at home.
Beats that van
like
with no windows he was using. He lined with those mattresses. And
yeah, having to run the extension cords.
That was an awkward talk with the police.
Sure. All right, well, I want to learn more about that training you do and all about you in our first segment, which is rapid fire questions.
Who do you work for?
What's new?
Who are you?
What's happening?
What's wrong with you?
All right, Nick, in this segment, we are going to rapidly fire questions at you. You'll see a little timer that will appear on the right side of your screen. You'll have approximately 1 minute to answer each question. If you take too long, Peter will buzz you.
Did you have the buzzer last week?
Like that, I did.
Okay.
And
it took him a minute to find it.
Yeah, I bet.
It's magical. And then we'll move on to the next question, and we're going to rotate. So the first question is coming at you from Peter.
Yeah, so we actually had someone on from Cisco last week, and we discussed, I think we know what Cisco is all about, but I want to know exactly what it is a technical leader does. I assume you're not the technical leader, you're one of many technical leaders, but what does that role encompass?
So a technical leader is kind of a combination between a senior engineer who does a mix of hands-on work, assisting with things like delivery. It depends on your organization, of course. If you're a TL in a delivery organization, you'd be helping people do that. But it's also a mix of kind of behind the scenes, more strategic things. So I'm part of a number of initiatives inside of my division where we are trying to say, how can Cisco do a better job of becoming a software company? How can we do a better job of positioning ourselves as a leader in the automation space? And how can we help enable our mid-level and junior engineers to do delivery against these new advanced technologies? And it's my job to kind of weave all that together.
Now, Nick, I know you served in the United States Marine Corps, and I do want to thank you for your service to our country. I am curious, though, is that like where you developed your technical skills, or did you do something unrelated in the Corps?
It was, I would say it's mostly unrelated. So my time in the Marine Corps, I spent roughly half of it as an infantryman carrying a rocket launcher, which is obviously not relevant to this. The second half, I was a commissioned officer. Yeah, I was a commissioned officer in communications. And in that role, I led about 55 Marines, so a relatively large organization. And I didn't do a lot of hands-on keyboard stuff. My tech skills were not terribly good, but my job was to plan and support battalion level operations. So where do we need to set up retransmission sites? How, what technologies and what equipment that I have are we going to distribute to our individual companies? How's that going to work? And how is my plan going to support the commander's intent and the overall concept of operations? So it wasn't nearly as technical. That came after my military service for the most part.
I will say there's a lot of times, like in the server room, a rocket launcher would come in handy for a lot of problems.
Yeah. I think you could fix it with that. Yeah. Now, you also had the opportunity to work with the armed services after you ended your career with the Marine Corps. How is that different, or is it the same, or is it just a completely different ball of wax?
Yeah, it was significantly different. It's much more like a regular civilian job. You 9 to 5, you go in, but the difference is that instead of building a fixed site, here's this data center, or here's this branch site, and here's this point of sale system, those concepts don't really make as much sense, especially in a tactical military network, which is where I spent most of my time. In that environment, you're trying to connect remote vehicles, or if you do work with the Navy or the Air Force with ships or aircraft. In my case, it was mostly the Army, so things like trucks, tanks, and dismounted infantrymen, and making sure that they can all communicate in a way that's reliable and secure. And obviously, there's a whole discussion to be had about that.
Yeah, so as a Marine working with the Army guys, you kind of had to dumb things down a little bit so they could understand.
I don't know. The dumbness can go both ways sometimes. It's really hard to pinpoint the directionality there sometimes.
So we mentioned that you also do some training on your own. So what kind of topics do you like to cover? Is it all Cisco stuff or just kind of general networking?
Yeah, so there's kind of a mix there. I do everything from general purpose networking stuff like protocol deep dives on various protocols, routing protocols, or just other things. There is some Cisco specific training, notably on things like routing, switching, service provider, and design technologies. And then there's a lot on automation that I've recently done, mostly network automation, but some that's a little more generic systems types automation, and a little bit of introductory stuff on DevOps and software development. So it's a pretty wide aperture, kind of combining networking engineering that I have many years of experience with, and some of the newer technologies around software development, network automation, and DevOps for the most part. So a pretty wide scope of things.
Gotcha. Now, I always dig a little too deep into people's LinkedIn bios and history. So I'm curious, what was your best event as a member of the men's varsity swimming team at Joseph C. Wilson High School?
Oh, that's an interesting one. So we're going back now almost 2 decades, but I can still remember it. So I went to a city school, and in that particular school, we didn't have our swim team was very small, and we didn't have a lot of great swimmers. And there were a number of private schools in the city, which were, you had great swimmers. They were impossible to beat. But of all the city schools, we were the best by far. And we went up against one of the private schools known as McQuaid Jesuit, I think was what they're called.
Sure.
And we nearly defeated them. Towards the end, they realized that they needed to treat us seriously, and they ended up beating us. But it was great because we almost won against an opponent that was far more better trained, better budget, better swimmers in general. And I think that was memorable for a lot of us because no one had even come close. So that was pretty cool.
I don't know how they haven't made a Disney movie of this
what
yet.
you don't know is McQuaid, right, is Lone Wolf McQuaid, played by Chuck Norris.
Oh, okay.
Who, those swimmers were his progeny.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
That explains it.
Yeah.
It was all, the tears of all of his enemies were what filled the pool.
Yeah, that's how they swim every day. Yeah.
Sure. That's easier to swim. All right. Well, we want to get into a little bit of what you do more on a daily basis in talking about networking and things like that. So let's jump into our next segment and find out what it is that grinds your gears.
You know what really grinds my gears? This Lindsay Lohan. You know what really grinds my gears? You, America.
We now go to Peter for You Know What Really Grinds My Gears.
All right, so what I have listed here that you told us is you're upset about fads in networking. And so as a guy on the outside, what does that mean to you? What is it specifically that you're upset about?
Yeah, so I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of clarify something that it's not new, but I think there's a big misunderstanding. And one of the fads, or at least a new technology that has been adopted very rapidly over the past 7 or 8 years, is something called segment routing, sometimes called SR. And there are various forms of it. The one we typically see deployed is SR in MPLS context, multi-protocol label switching, of course. And there's this belief that SR somehow changes the fundamental way in which IP MPLS works. And that's just not true. And I think this confusion comes from the fact that when you buy a single vendor's equipment, let's just stay with Cisco because I know it, those devices are going to have the same block of labels. So the same numeric range, it's called the segment routing global block, or sRGB, that the devices will allocate labels for all their prefix SIDs and their node SIDs. And if you don't know what those mean, it's okay. My point here is that if you were to measure label switch paths across the network enabled with this technology, you would see the same label value used at each hop by default. And a lot of people interpret this to mean that the labels somehow have global relevance, that there's a global context. After all, they came from a block that's called the segment routing global block. But that doesn't change the way that MPLS works. Labels only have local significance. Every router, upon receiving MPLS encapsulated traffic, makes its own autonomous decision. And those labels that it receives are always going to be local labels on that device. Now, in segment routing, the label information is communicated through the link state routing protocol, like IS to IS or OSPF. And when the other routers learn that, they can combine the SID information with the sRGB range for that particular device to identify the proper outgoing label towards that device. And of course, that outgoing label is the local label on the ingress device. So this isn't new. Nothing I've said is new. This is how MPLS has worked for more than 2 decades, 3 at this point. I'm only saying this to make sure that people who are learning about segment routing, it's not that different. The way labels work is still the same. It's just that the manner in which they are determined and advertised is a little bit different. So protocols like BGP labeled unicast or label distribution protocol or RSVP for traffic engineering, they have a much more explicit method where I'm going to say, use this label value, and it's just the value by itself. In segment routing, it's a little more indirect, where you have, here's my sRGB range, here's my prefix SID, and then you add those together, kind of almost like an offset in a way, and that tells you the label value. But just because all of us are using the same range by default, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to. Different vendors can come default with different ranges. Obviously, as a designer, you'd want to unify that. But if you went to the middle of your network and you change the range on one device, and assuming that, you know, the size of the range was the same, so for example, a range of 1,000, even if it starts at a different point, your network is still probably going to work okay, but you'll notice that the label swapping is going to look a little bit, because that device with the different range is going to have a different set of local labels. And the only reason I'm harping on this is because I've had many conversations with engineers who are otherwise experienced in things like MPLS, who then say, oh, well, this segment routing global block gives you these labels with global significance. No, they don't. They're still locally significant. It just so happened that we all came to the same conclusion. So I just wanted to kind of wipe that away so that if you're learning about segment routing and you're like, oh, this is so new and it's hard and it's totally changed the way MPLS works. No, it hasn't. It's just, there's a couple minor modifications. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of segment routing. I'm working on a large customer project right now using that technology. But it's important to understand that it's really not that different, and you don't need to discard everything you've learned about MPLS in order to learn about SR.
You know, I've got a theory on it because I've heard people make the mistake. And for people like me, where I got started with Frame Relay and over time moved over to MPLS. And with Frame Relay, you see the Delcy numbers, and it's really rare, or at least for me, it was always really rare, that both endpoints on like a private line, if it wasn't like a true P2P, that you'd have different Delcy numbers on both ends. So it was just kind of normal. I was used to that. But I think for a lot of people, when they buy MPLS lines now, the ISPs, unless they work for the ISPs are kind of obfuscating a lot of it. They don't see all of that. I'll talk to people that say, hey, I use MPLS all the time, but they're not actually doing the configuration piece of it. They're just at the endpoints where all the labels have already been removed at that point. So like, is that where you see the confusion coming from, or is it people that should know better that are actually working with MPLS?
This would be on the topic of people who should know better. So you're absolutely right.
Then you're in real trouble.
Yeah, no, everything you said is 100% correct. You'll hear a lot of people who are really just getting an Ethernet handoff and forming a BGP neighbor to an ISP. You're not, I mean, yes, MPLS may be used as the transport, but you don't play any role in it. So you wouldn't know. It'd be like if you were riding on a train and you told someone, I know a lot about how trains work. It's like, well, unless you did that research on your own, you would have no idea. You just happen to be a passenger. So my specific gripe in this episode was mostly about people who have worked with MPLS, like the people at the carrier who may be troubleshooting label switch paths or trying to understand segment routing, or they may suddenly believe that the paradigm of MPLS has changed because now we have these globally significant labels. No, you don't. They just happen to be the same value because everyone had the same sRGB, but the values are still locally significant. And I just wanted to remind everyone about that because it can be very confusing when you're trying to troubleshoot a problem and you somehow think that, oh, the label is same end to end. And if the label is not the same, that must imply a problem. No, that's not the case. So you might be chasing ghosts if you believe that.
So teach your children young and have them prepared.
That's right.
That's right.
Feel the same way, by the way. Just want you guys to know. I agree.
That's all you ever talk about.
Yeah. The problem is I already forgot everything I knew about segment routing and stuff. Like I let it all go. Yeah. So I made that mistake. All right. So I know that you've got that nice setup now to do the kind of remote teaching and stuff, but you've got some in-person training coming back. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually have a course tomorrow with O'Reilly. It's a network DevOps course. I typically do 1 or 2 live courses per month. So, every other week or so, I'll do one with O'Reilly. I've got a Python one. I've got a general Python one, Python requests, Ansible network automation, and network DevOps there. Through Pluralsight, I have 32 courses. I'm not going to sit here and list them. We'd be here all day. Those span from Cisco specific stuff, software stuff, network automation, protocol deep dives, and also some Cisco specific products like SD-WAN automation, DNA center automation, several security products and such. So there's a lot there. I also, an author of several books, from everything from Cisco specific, like CCIE type training stuff to more generic cloud, IoT, network automation technology. So I tend to publish in a variety of places just to kind of maximize the reach there, and also provide some business diversity as well. Doing business with multiple customers, it just seemed to be like the smart thing to do.
And njrusmc.net, that's still the website?
That is the website. And if you go there, you'll feel like you stepped into a time machine. It's very basic. I built it just using a text editor and simple HTML, a little bit of CSS, and that's it. Nice and easy to keep things, you want to go there and find a resource, you can go there without being badgered to sign up or make a donation or anything like that. Just click what you need, download it, and go about your day.
Yeah,
don't worry about my background.
It seemed like the page was missing the under construction icon and the made with Netscape Navigator
and the counter on the bottom.
Yeah, the number of people who visited. Yeah.
Did you always start at like 10,000 to look impressive? Like no one started their counter at 0. All right. Well, thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time with us and griping and letting us gripe with you and teaching us about what you do. So thank you so much, Nick.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
All right, everybody, stay tuned. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and look at the news from this week. That's all coming up on Technado with Don Pizzette.
Welcome to IT Pro TV, an e-learning company with thousands of hours of engaging video training for IT professionals with fresh content added daily. What makes IT Pro TV stand out? It all starts with our edutainers, who create better than classroom experiences for training you look forward to watching.
So an edutainer is someone who takes a topic, an educational topic, and makes it more fun, enjoyable. My vision for IT Pro TV was to make the product that I wish I had when I got started.
The dashboard is great because you can actually pick up right where you left off. You can also end up seeing new courses that are available to you, and with a membership, you have access to a variety of study tools.
Follow along with virtual labs and test your skills with practice tests. And unlike traditional training, you aren't handcuffed to your desk. Sure, you can watch from there or from your couch with Apple TV and Roku apps, or from anywhere with mobile apps. The training is even available for download. If you're ready to watch and learn with the IT pros, check out the flexible membership choices online today at www.itpro.tv.
All right, welcome back to Technado with Don Pizzette. A lot of news to get to. We've got some Linux stuff, some Microsoft stuff, a couple of Deja news articles looking back at some things we've discussed recently, but we're starting with Phoronix. This article is AMD now backing AlmaLinux as this increasingly popular RHEL CentOS alternative.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like there's a word missing. We were discussing in the break that...
And I know, Peter, you're very passionate about Linux, too, so you stay on top of this. But, last year, Red Hat pulled support for CentOS and converted it over to CentOS Stream, which is not considered stable enough for most production environments. And so a number of other vendors stepped in. AlmaLinux and Rocky Linux are probably the two leading ones that are out there. And a lot of people have been asking me, which one do you recommend? What should I do? If I'm running CentOS, which of these other distros should I switch to? And for a lot of people, I've given the advice of moving over to Ubuntu because it's commercially supported and already mature, but it's kind of a different paradigm than what you have over with Red Hat-based stuff. So, different update tools, different packages, and so on. So for people that want to stay in that Red Hat space, you've got to make a choice. And it's hard to pick who the winner's going to be because these guys are all brand new. Rocky Linux and AlmaLinux are both a year old, right? So it's hard to tell who's going to be around 10 years from now, but it's starting to look like AlmaLinux is pulling into the lead. Rocky Linux had the advantage of being created by the founder, one of the original founders of CentOS. So it's got a little bit of
pedigree.
Gravitas. I don't know what the fancy pants word for that is, but AlmaLinux now has investors, right? Sponsors, people that are pumping money into it.
Money never does anything bad to stuff.
Yeah, this I'm always on the wrong side of these things. I mean, I had a Zune before an iPod. I had an HD DVD player.
I had an HD
before
DVD
Blu-ray.
as well.
My family had a Betamax when I was a kid.
Did you?
Yeah, so
A friend of mine had one.
I'm sure I would pick Rocky Linux then in this case.
Yeah.
Well, we still don't really know who's going to win out, but they both have sponsors. But AMD is a pretty big deal. Like once you get one of the CPU companies in there, Intel has not backed either one. So for AMD to step in, and AMD, we've heard here on the podcast, has really been releasing some server-grade CPU hardware recently, making some big strides. It's certainly a good sign. So if you're still on the fence between the two, it's starting to look like AlmaLinux is going to be that choice.
Would you say that would be your choice, Don Pizzette, on the scene
Well, he said Ubuntu.
No, I would never stake my career on a Linux distro that's been around less than a year.
Gun to your head.
Yep.
You got to choose one.
Oh, if I had to
Rocky or
choose
Alma,
one?
where are you going?
If I had to choose one, I would pick Alma.
Okay.
And not because of the sponsorship, but because of the design model. Rocky Linux is owned by one person. That original founder from CentOS.
Yeah.
And we've already seen what happens there with OpenBSD, right? The Theo Durrett or whatever his name is. That guy's a total... I mean,
he's not cool.
And Rocky's been punched in the face a lot of times.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I'm always hesitant to deal with projects that have a single a dictator, right, or whatever. And AlmaLinux actually has a community set up, a committee where they do things by vote and stuff, which can also lead to debacles, but at least you feel like they won't make any crazy decisions.
Yeah, because typically that just mires things down and makes things take forever to come out.
Don't they all just have a higher dictator in Linus Torvalds?
Sort of, as far as the kernel's concerned, but they have total freedom over everything else. But I guess we have to remember, like, these guys aren't creating everything from scratch either. They're just compiling what Red Hat has already done. So Red Hat's already the dictator. Why stick a second one on there?
So, I mean, that begs the question. If they're basically just clones of Red Hat, what does it matter which one I go with? Because they're basically going to do the same thing, right?
Yeah, the support timeliness of updates. So like when Red Hat pushes a security update or a new version comes out, so like when RHEL 9 comes out, how long does it take for AlmaLinux 9 and Rocky Linux 9 to come out?
They release before Red Hat does.
That would be interesting.
Well, when there's a 0 day, I guess, do you maybe trust the company that's got backing financially, or do you trust the company's got one guy who's maybe didn't get the phone call?
They don't just have one guy. just to be clear.
Yeah, it's not a dude in a cubicle going, "This is fun."
Yeah, I will say though, all my friends use AlmaLinux.
AlmaLinux.
So
you trademark that. They'll take it.
Copyright.
I not that I'm calling you out here for your soundboard skills, but that would have been a rim shot.
Well, I wasn't a joke. It was a serious tagline.
He was like laying down.
I'm pitching that.
Truth.
Fact.
I gotta
Preach, Peter.
I gotta make all this stuff alphabetical or something, because I got a drum roll.
Yeah, something.
Oh, there it is.
That soundboard is like a schizophrenic nightmare come true.
Yeah. They're on there in the order I put them on there.
So it is your nightmare come true.
Yeah. So I know this board. But
Hold on.
like
What? Kill who?
It's like that John Cusack film where he's talking about how he's organized his records, autobiography.
High Fidelity?
I don't know, something.
Yeah, I think that's
all
what
his
it was.
movies blend together, but except for Grosse Pointe
Better
Blank.
Off Dead.
But he's like, I've arranged my albums
The street value of this
autobiographically.
pure snow. Is that
Yeah.
That's not Bobcat Gold. That's
Yeah, it's Bobcat Goldthwait.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Celebrated actor.
He was
the
indeed.
best.
He will be missed.
I like.
He's still alive.
He's still alive. Yeah.
Yeah. I prefer One Crazy Summer.
Oh, okay.
That was he was in that too.
Grosse
Yeah.
Pointe Blank is definitely an entertaining flick, though.
Anyway. All right, well, let's move on to an article at tomshardware.com. Windows 11 desktop watermark might come to unsupported PCs. And I know you had the watermark before if you had an unlicensed copy of Windows, but this is just basically saying your computer isn't powerful enough, loser.
Yeah, and some additional news has come out since this article was written. You can remove the might. It's coming. We announced last week, so Daniel and I, we talked about it, that the Rufus utility had been updated.
That's right.
Where it could make a Windows 11 install ISO or USB key or whatever that did not have the TPM requirement. So if your system didn't have the right CPU or a TPM and couldn't run Windows 11, you could actually make an install media that would ignore that. Microsoft has responded in a rather passive-aggressive way in that if you do that, if you make an install and you don't have a TPM and you don't have a, whatever it is, 8th generation Intel or newer or whatever their CPU requirement is, that
9,000 gigs of RAM.
Something like that, yeah.
It's right around that number.
It will add a watermark at the bottom right hand of your screen telling you that you're running unsupported hardware. Now, most people can ignore a watermark like that just fine, but if you're somebody who gets annoyed by a message floating on top of your desktop like that, then you need to buy a new computer.
Or if you're someone that, you do a lot of presentations and you don't want a watermark on your screen that says this person is poor. Yeah. Because that's basically what's happening.
So riddle me this, Batman. A, it is not necessarily poor because there are some really nice laptops that this will not run on.
That's true.
Right? And then B, Don, how often do you actually see your desktop?
That is true. If you've got Windows full screen,
you're running browsers and...
Have you ever closed Chrome?
Right. Got to be honest, right? I do not know why this is a thing. Like, are there people just sitting there going, I got to get the watermark.
Yeah, it's back there.
Oh, my God. They're scratching their neck and they're having hive breakouts.
It's the people that freak out if they've got, like, a notification on their phone next to the messages. Like, I got to read that.
To me, it's a badge of honor. I'm like, I told it. Like, I give it the big middle finger.
I think as a consumer, you can do that, and it's fine, right? But imagine you work at a company that has 10,000 employees.
Yeah, give it to me.
And an end user, an accountant, somebody in the marketing department or whatever, they've got a laptop, and there's this watermark that's on there.
Yeah.
They're going to open up a support ticket.
So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to use group policy and everybody gets the same background. It's white.
But won't they wouldn't overwrite it still?
Well, you can't see it. It's
or
white
you're saying
text
the
on a
color
white
of the text, whatever the text is.
Boom, Microsoft.
So
there's going to be a drop shadow.
Well, I was about to say, I haven't seen this one. I haven't tried it to trigger it, but on the activation one, there is a drop shadow.
Then
so
I will use like a snow pattern.
You got to be real creative.
Just white noise. Yeah.
You're talking to the person that's all my life is to just get around things.
Somebody has to have already done that. Hey, we'll have to Google around. I bet somebody's made a way to cover the activation one.
Yeah. If it looks like a QR code kind of background where it's just all kinds of black and white.
That's it. And that's that way. We are also hiding the fact that we haven't activated.
So here's my question. I guess, is the term unsupported used wrong here? Because if you're running it, how is it unsupported hardware? I mean, it works.
Unsupported means if you call Microsoft and ask for help, they're going to tell you to go beat sand.
They're going to say, oh, it's on your end because you're not running a powerful enough system.
Right, and it's not so much about the power, it's about the security features, that you're missing security features that they require for Windows 11. And so, like, if you were to get a virus or you were to get hacked or whatever, like that's on you because you didn't run what they specified.
Well, I'm thinking half the time people call those numbers and go, I'm having trouble accessing my bank website. Can you help me? And they go, no.
Yeah.
I've been on a support line before. That's what they do. I just bought this vacuum cleaner. And I'm like, I'm not is there a number on the side of the box? Why'd you call me?
Yeah. Going back to the backgrounds, maybe come up with like a wallpaper that's all the different notifications they've done like that.
And just like tiled across.
Before,
What you can do is you can make one of those like art projects that like you use random things.
Yeah, this version of Windows Vista is not has not been legally downloaded.
Well, again, just ways to get around stuff is and plus I don't care.
Well, the way to get around this one, the easy way,
is just
run Windows 10. It's still supported for like 5 more years.
That is also true. But there's like an HKLM. You can go into the into the Hive and dick around with it a little bit.
At least for now.
Yeah, and change it. Change a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 0, and it's gone.
Magic happens.
Yes. Boom. All right, let's head over now to arstechnica.com. Behold, a password phishing site that can trick even savvy users. Just when you thought you'd seen every phishing trick out there, BitB comes along. So how does this one work? Is that wrong? Did I say it wrong?
No, that's right, isn't it?
It's just like BITB.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an abbreviation for browser in the browser.
Yeah.
So kind of like software as a service, which we'd say SaaS. So
well, I'm thinking it's like a play on man in the middle. MITM.
Okay. And I wouldn't say minim.
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Well,
I would because I'm not as smart.
I believe it's actually bite B, as in you can bite my B.
Yeah, right? I drew a target, sink your teeth in.
Yeah, it says here, kiss my ass, Daniel.
So I shared a story with Daniel the other day, and a couple of the other people here in the office, that I almost got hit by a drive-through click installer the other day.
Almost.
And almost, yeah. I was saved by, I run Sophos Intercept X. It caught it and stopped it, so I was lucky. But I had mistyped a web page address, and it took me to a page that immediately popped up a Google reCAPTCHA. And I'm used to seeing these. Normally it's like, hey, click on the squares that have a bus or a bicycle or whatever.
So tough. That's the most stressful
Dude, they
thing
really
to me.
are a pain.
'Cause I'm like, that power line kind of goes through
Some
that
of them
one.
is like, oh, it's like a little bit.
Does that count?
But if you've passed enough of them, all you see is a box that says, I'm not a robot. And you just check the box, right? And so I have motor trained myself now. When I see I'm not a robot, well, I'm not. So I check the box and off I go. So that's what came up. And I'm like, oh, man, I got hit by a reCAPTCHA. I thought maybe I had like a VPN up or something. And so I went to click the box, but it wasn't a box. It was a picture. It was a picture, and the whole thing was a link. And so when I clicked on it, I got tricked into clicking on a link. And sure enough, it was a malicious one, which my software caught and stopped it. So that was good. But the reason I was talking to Daniel about it was like, hey, I sort of know what I'm doing. I'm pretty well trained, and yet
Got your own podcast.
that got me. So how am I supposed to expect regular end users to not get caught by this stuff when I myself got caught by it? Well, this attack is a little more sophisticated than even that. We're used to going to websites that have a sign in with Google link or sign in with Twitch, sign in with Facebook, right? These social media logins that are designed where we don't have to have individual passwords for all these different sites, and they use OAuth to handle the authentication. Well, what this security researcher came up with was a way to make a modal window that is styled with CSS to look like a pop-up browser window, but it's actually not a pop-up browser window. It's just a kind of a floating image. Yeah, a modal on the page. And that means he can completely fake the address bar to show a valid security certificate link and to have google.com or whatever in the URL. So visually it passes all the checks. And when you click on continue with email or sign in with Google or whatever, you're actually on his server at that point, sending your credentials to his system.
Good times.
Pretty sneaky stuff.
Good times. You know, this is what I've learned throughout the history of my career here, Don, is that if it's easy, do not do it. That's just what it boils down to. If it's, hey, just click this and you're on your way to the bells and whistles you've been wanting all day long, that's wrong. Actually, I've heard a lot of people talking about how you should create a new email account for everything you do. And that it's not just passwords are, crazy, but you have different email accounts for everything you sign into, and stop using things like single sign-on, because if an attacker ever makes it past that, they are past everything and now have complete access into your world. So, I mean, if you want to be secure in this world, you never click a link, right? You always go, well, I'll just go there and log in. I'll just go to the website. I'll type it in my browser and I will do the thing. This is the safest way. Is it wildly inconvenient? Yep, sure is. But is it more or less inconvenient than, say, oh, I don't know, having all your bank account drained and your life stolen?
Well, it's the same thing they say about, don't give your phone number to or don't give your information to anyone that calls you.
Nothing.
Say, okay, I'll call you back as the bank.
Yeah.
Do you ever use plus addressing?
Plus addressing, no.
So I've never done that. Where you add like on the end of the email? Or,
different providers have different features. They don't all have this, but like in Microsoft Office 365, if you have an address, so let's say I'm Don at Microsoft.com, right? That I could do Don, the plus symbol, and then whatever string I wanted at Microsoft.com.
So you could make it specific to Don plus bank, and that's the one you use at your bank account.
And so the nice part about that is you have a different email address on every site, but it's only one mailbox. So you're just checking one mailbox. And if you start getting spam on an address, you know exactly which site it was that sold you out or got breached or whatever. But on a negative side, like what you were talking about, Daniel, a separate email account for each one, an attacker would look at this and say, well, let me just knock off everything after the plus, and that's their real account, right? So it's not really...
Plus, if they gain access to the account, they would have access to all those mailboxes as well.
That's true.
Right? So this is like, let's say for whatever reason, I'm not using an authenticator, I'm using my email for two-factor, right? If I two-factored into some site, and they somehow got that 2FA, and they were able to log into that site, that's all they would have access to. That's the only thing in my life that they would have access to. Everything else would still be segmented. Yeah. And they would have to do it again for other things, and that would be a very heavy lift.
But you'd lose like 5 years of your life with all the...
Setting it up, it's a lot of work up front. But on the back end, once it's done, you got something like a manager like LastPass or whatever. Yeah. Your life is easy at that point. Oh, I need to go into that one. Cool. Click, and I'm there.
Yeah. Something to consider.
A lot of work. I'm not doing it.
It's a lot of work. Yep.
I love the part of
More
this.
or less work than say, oh, I don't know, reclaiming your identity from an identity.
It's a lot of work
theft.
too, but you only have to do that like once or twice in your life.
Yeah, and you're good, right?
Honestly, it sounds easier to just get a new identity.
Yeah.
It does,
Right?
doesn't
I
it?
mean,
Yeah, you can get
Man,
those.
y'all stealing IDs. Can I have another one?
yeah, you just go buy one.
Yeah.
Dark web.
Let me get one of them
selling this?
identities.
Can I buy my identity back?
That'd be smart. That'd be smart. I love that there's a section, a subheading in this article that says, "Malvertisers, please don't read this."
Yeah.
So it's like this could be bad.
Yeah, it was a pretty smart move though. Like the whole idea of faking, because we do train users to do like look for these things, look for those things, and this just completely circumvents all that because you're asking a user to do something that they don't normally do.
Yeah, and this is
to like try to unearth that this is a scam.
This is a tough one, like to identify, because they even like in his proof of concept showed where the modal window you can drag and move it around.
Yeah.
So unless you try and move it out of the browser window, you don't actually know that it's
Right.
Yeah, it's slick.
And who does that? Right.
Nope.
Whose workflow is now that a pop-up has come up? Let me drag it around.
Yeah, let me
see
move
if
it to
it'll-
my other
if it'll
monitor
move
or
off.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one does that. So.
All right. Well, let's take a look now at our next article, which is actually looking back. So this is Deja News.
Deja News.
All right, so I was looking ahead here to the URL this is from. It's from datacenterdynamics.com. And for some reason, I read that first as data nerdy Amex. I was like, what is going on? But I figured it out finally.
This
where the
is
spaces
turd.
Are.
Yeah. This is turdy dynamics.
Turdy. Yeah. Yeah, there's a T in nerdy. Is what I was like, why is there a T in nerdy? All right, so this is OVHcloud fire support. SBG2 data center had wooden ceilings, no extinguisher, and no power cuts. That's fantastic. So this is a big data center.
Yeah, so it's been basically a year exactly. That's how long it took them to study this fire to report on it. But we reported on it way back last year that the OVH hosting service, which they're a French organization, so cloud hosting, kind of like DigitalOcean or
So they were
Media
hosting
Temple.
in Notre Dame, and that's what started the fire.
It was in the attic.
Isn't that basically the same thing that happened?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. Yep. So
it's like, it's a historic building. We can't.
Let's put a data center in it.
So they were operating out of a building that was not designed as a data center originally. If you ever saw the pictures on the outside, like it looked like somebody just threw together a bunch of crazy mismatched buildings. But they had a fire breakout, which when you have a ton of electrical equipment, the more you have, especially with batteries and UPSs and stuff, the more likely you are to have a fire. But they did not take proper precautions, and for whatever reason, the various fire inspectors and things in France did not catch this. But the most egregious things, there were wooden ceilings, which allowed the fire to spread pretty well. There were, when it says no extinguisher, it doesn't mean like there was no little fire extinguisher. It means there was no fire suppression system, period.
Like a sprinkler system or
whatever.
A gas.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they didn't have that. And then the worst part of all, because when you're dealing with electronics, any fire quickly becomes an electrical fire. They didn't have master cutoff switches. So when this fire broke out, it took 3 hours before they were able to cut electricity to the building. And
to get the
Sit there
scissors.
and watch while.
pretty, I mean, what are you going to do? Break out the
What are
fire
you gonna
hoses?
do? Right? Yeah. Let's get everything wet.
Well, and all the doors too locked from the outside.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
stupid.
So it was really just a tragic happening. This whole data center, it affected a lot of customers. The customers are rightfully upset that they have downtime and outages and damages, that they're now starting to look at OVH and saying, hey, you guys weren't doing your due diligence. You didn't put forth the right effort into securing our data, and so now they're being accused of fraud. Well, OVH wasn't a big company, and so I do feel bad when you see like small companies are doing the best they can,
Right.
and have a
Working with what they
tragedy.
got.
But
Like a 150-year-old wood building.
a
And
fire
what for-
sprinkler system, that seems
You think that they would have thrown that in
yeah.
there?
Yeah.
And plus, I don't know why they were storing boxes of oily rags next to the data
Sure.
center.
Yeah, I mean that's weird,
It's
isn't
weird,
it?
but
yeah.
and why Billy was over in the corner dipping rags in oil and putting them in a box.
Well, the fire inspection was right after lunch, and a couple bottles of red wine,
some cheese,
a Bordeaux,
nice,
maybe.
Yeah,
brioche.
So, I thought it was interesting because we don't always find out about this stuff. When a major data center like this goes offline, we typically want to know what the cause was. In this case, it was a malfunctioning power supply that sparked this fire.
Wait, was it the power supply we talked about hacking the other day? Somebody
No, well,
like it set it on fire.
It was in a battery backup, but I don't think it was like maliciously done.
The UPC ones,
That would be ironic.
But it was able to spread and be so damaging. They mentioned there were a few other things, like there was a free flow air conditioning system that basically created a chimney effect that continually fed oxygen to the fire.
We want to keep getting you air.
Yeah. Well, when you're running a data center, you need cool air.
It's like a bellow.
And and all that just went together for the perfect storm, and just devastating effect.
How did you melt stainless steel? It got hot.
Yeah.
Jet fuel cannot burn, cannot melt steel.
When you light it on fire, it can.
Just on my conspiracy theory websites.
Wasn't that a thing from the 9/11 investigations?
Yeah,
9/11 thing.
That's the big sticking point for a lot of people.
They were saying that there's some sort of like thermite charges that were on the building, and that's how it melted through the beams. And
yeah, same people were responsible for this fire.
I'm not up on my metallurgy, so if jet fuel burns, it cannot.
So they're saying
melt steel,
that
or does?
jet fuel by itself would not burn to the extent.
Well, it
hot
did
enough to melt the beams.
Okay,
but it clearly did.
And because you can see like the slag pouring out of the beams. You gotta watch some.
I know,
conspiracy theories, man. Like you can see.
Are you not on Reddit?
The video evidence of the slag being poured out of the beam where the thermite is cutting through.
Wait, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're saying that it absolutely did melt the beam.
But they're saying it wasn't. That those there were.
It must have been the charges that were planted by.
Right. The planes were just like
President Bush.
The reason why this came down.
Huh.
And gave us
interesting.
Yeah.
I have somehow managed to miss that whole conspiracy theory. Yeah.
You are.
The landing was fake.
Bro, you call yourself an X-Files fan?
I know. I've not been doing my homework.
You disappoint me. I'm walking away.
It's all true. This is actually the same building where they filmed the moon landing in France.
That's why they had to destroy the building, right?
That's why they had to.
Duh.
Yeah, it knew too much.
They're like, wait, China's about to land on the moon. We gotta get rid of this stuff.
All right. Well, our next article here is also Deja News, and this one is from ZDNet. It says CafePress owner fined $500,000 for shoddy security covering up a data breach. So I assume this was not in the UK because this would have been a much higher fine.
Oh, well, believe me that I believe CafePress was based, or the company that owned them, which has a silly name. What was the name? I don't know, something like Banana Peels or something. Residual Pumpkin. There we go.
Residual Pumpkin.
It's a group of grown-ups.
Okay.
I told you it was a weird name.
Yeah.
I believe they were U.S.-based, but there absolutely will be some GDPR fines involved in things that just haven't happened yet. So what's going on is that CafePress, they're a website that sells art prints, and I think they do T-shirts.
Yeah, like
and
one-off like shirts and stuff if you want.
Like Etsy before Etsy.
So they've been around a long time. Seems like a fairly reputable business. I've probably bought something from them over the years. I just don't recall. A coffee mug that says "World's Best Boss" or something.
You bought it for yourself?
Yeah. Nobody gives their boss that.
Every time he drinks, he's like, "Damn right."
I think that's the joke from. I think that's the first episode of The Office where he's like,
really?
he's like, so I got myself this mug, and it's like "World's Greatest Boss" or whatever.
Nice.
Well, there we go. So they sold the company, right? So another company came in and bought it, a company called Planet Art, and it was quickly...
No, it's Plain Tart.
Yeah, plain.
Plain Tart? All
No,
right, I can see that.
There's no space in this word either.
It's not turdy like the other one. So with Planet Art,
For emphasis on the syllable.
yeah. So they bought the company, and then after digging in, discovered some really interesting things. The biggest of which was that there were numerous data breaches throughout the years, including one that was a complete and total breach of the customer database that was not disclosed by the previous owners of CafePress. So they sold the company to a new ownership group.
That's what you do when you're hacked.
Yeah,
and
you
they
get rid of it.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're liable now.
Yeah, man, I'm out of here.
But yeah, by the way, you guys were hacked. All right.
That meme of Homer just like
Yeah. I don't work here anymore.
So in 2019, they were fully breached. All their entire customer database was leaked. All the email addresses, mailing addresses, and then I thought this was really odd: 180,000 unencrypted social security numbers. I'm not exactly sure why CafePress had those.
Oh, I would guess because you as a seller might get a W-9.
Sellers. Totally makes sense. Yes,
Yeah.
they've had the 1099. Yeah. So they'd have to get the taxes on that. But the passwords were hashed with a weak hash that was reversible, so attackers could figure out the passwords that were in the database. This was just a total barn doors blown wide open breach.
Yeah.
All the data gone. They did not disclose that, and they did not notify their customers. And what's worse, some of the storefronts that they were hosting that were breached, the customers reported it in, and CafePress closed those stores, saying that they violated terms of service, and charged
you're
them,
a snitch.
and charged them a $25 closing fee.
Wow. Nice.
Well, and that's all going to our fine fund.
Yeah.
Yep.
Stitches get stitches, right? Yeah.
So what it all comes down to is that they were not doing patches in a reasonable time frame. So there were disclosures on vulnerabilities that they easily could have patched. The patches were out. They just had to do updates. There were security practices they were not following, and so now there is a lawsuit basically, and the I believe it was the SEC. Who was it? Somebody.
I was going to say, were these like
FTC.
compliance things that they were not?
It says the FTC.
The FTC. All right. So the FTC is stepping in and saying, look, you got to pay a $500,000 fine.
Yeah.
And they're actually assessing it against the previous owners, which I think is really neat. You
Yes.
know? But the new owners have actually stepped up to the plate. They're the ones who, as soon as they found it, they reported it and disclosed it. So the new owners, Planet Art, they're doing everything they can to make it right. I guess you don't really have much of a choice once you bought a company. You got to sort it out.
Dang,
You
we
could sell the
should've done-
company.
Yeah.
Disclosure's hard.
So
Well, what's funny, you brought up snitches get stitches.
Yeah.
I had a shirt design, but it was actually, now that I think about it, on Zazzle, which is a competitor,
right.
that was the elf on the shelf, and it said "snitches get stitches," and
Nice.
sold a few of them, and then I finally got a cease and desist from
Hey, you
Big
made
Elf.
your money, right?
Yeah.
From Big Elf.
yeah,
Yeah.
they told Santa.
Yes. I'm like, yeah, this is why I made the shirt, because people
Now,
like you.
one of my questions about this is like they used verbiage like reasonable security measures.
Yes.
Is there a definition of reasonable security measures that they were being held to and did not? Or we've just decided.
Well, it said they were notified of the flaw and then ignored it. So I think that counts.
if there was a breach, that's but
Yeah.
they're saying that they were getting hit for not doing patches that because they're just so old. You should have done this already, and you didn't.
So in the United States, there is NIST guidance that sets aside what they consider the like bare minimum that you should be doing. Now, I don't know if that's what the FTC used in their reference, but it likely is. You know,
So, but what I'm saying is, I guess they were under some sort of compliance and governance that applied to them. They're not just some rando company.
you know, I'd be surprised if they did, because I think they are considered just a rando company.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean. Like, who are you to come in and say what was reasonable for me and what's not? If I'm not, is there a legal entity that says I must do these things if I run a company?
Apparently, the FTC.
That's what I'm saying. So if you start a company, be prepared.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a really good
Yeah.
point. I think that if you are starting a new company and you're going to do e-commerce, that you can't just go fly by the seat of your pants anymore.
Right.
There are minimum things you need to do.
Like if you're taking credit card payment, you have to be PCI. You don't technically have to be PCI compliant, but you should, because nobody will play ball with you if you don't. So like those would be standards that you can say, well, you take payment cards, you should have been following these rules and you weren't, and now we have some sort of like expectation of and that's what I mean is like, did they know that they were expected to do those things, or is there a reasonable doubt that they wouldn't have had to do that, and now they're being held to their feet to the fire?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, wrong timing again. Did not get that right.
Yeah, it's interesting, but it is a message out there to people. Like, if you do e-commerce online, you've got to keep your systems up to date. You've got to have some basic firewalls in place securing your systems. You have to audit admin logins. There's simple things that everybody should be doing, and if you're not doing them, you could be held liable for it. And the thing that usually is the indicator for me is if you apply for cyber insurance.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah. Would this have applied to a cyber insurance claim?
Yeah, and if you apply for cyber insurance coverage, the insurance company will make you fill out this giant questionnaire. Are you doing these things? Because if you're not doing your due diligence, if you're not doing the bare minimum, they're not going to pay you the premium.
Yeah.
Or that's not the right word. What is it when they pay you?
The premium is what you pay them.
Yeah, when they pay you, it's
They pay you the
something.
The damages.
What is
The,
They're not
the
gonna
claim.
give you
Claim. They're not going to pay the claim.
the claim. That's it.
I wonder if the French ISP or data center had insurance, and if they're paying that claim.
Man, who would insure a wooden building with a bunch of electrical stuff in it?
You know,
Some guy dipping away
Liberty,
in oil.
Liberty.
Yeah, the general.
I don't know.
the same people who sell flood insurance on the Florida coast, right? Probably the government.
Well, because they know that the day the big one comes or whatever, that they just go, oh, we're bankrupt.
So
now."
listen, we worked for a company that actually happened.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so when Hurricane Andrew hit, they were like, guess what, y'all? You're fired because we ain't got no money.
Yeah.
Right? And they laid
Well,
off
we had a
bunch
good
of
run.
people.
Yeah.
And there's actually what's called a reinsurer, like bigger insurance companies that insure insurance companies.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was really weird because one day we were working for one company and then the next day we were working for a different company. And keys didn't change.
No.
And it was right in the middle of hurricane season.
Yeah, weird.
All right, guys. I want to let you know about a couple of good webinars coming up. One today, Cisco's Networking as a Service, or NAS, is finally here. The who, what, where, and how of NAS with Anthony Sequeira and Ronnie Wong. If you remember Anthony from the past, he's been a guest here on Technado as well. So that'll be a good one taking place at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we've got another one coming up on April, 7th, that Don and Daniel will be doing together on choosing the right Linux distro in 2022.
No way.
Did you know you're doing that, Daniel?
Say yes to the distro.
Yeah. And the key differences between Linux distros. And so we've done one
What's
of those
Linux?
before. Well, yeah, you've got a couple weeks to do research.
I'm on it.
Alma is what you have to
The
suggest.
landscape has changed,
It
so
really
it's time
has.
to update our webinar.
has.
Yep.
So we gotta swap this one out for 2022. But head over to itpro.tv/webinars and you can check all of those out, register for them, or see the archive versions once the date has passed. And while you're on that internet, head over to technado.com, right? .gov.com, yeah.
.gov.
It's not edu, I know that. And you can get a 30% off coupon code for the lifetime of your IT Pro TV membership if you click the big orange button in the corner that says sponsored by IT Pro TV. You can also check out some other things on there. Send us some feedback. Let us know what your favorite Linux distro is, for example.
It's none of your business.
Would be fantastic. And yeah, that's all the stuff you can do on the internet. So thank you guys so much. Sorry I missed you last week. I've still got to go back and catch up on that episode.
Check it out.
It was a
But I'm
good
sure,
time.
Sure, it's all timely. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week right here on Technado with Don Pizzette.